My name is Eleanor Harper, but everyone back home calls me Ellie. I'm 56, a nurse case manager who knows what it looks like when a body is failing and when a family is lying to itself. This morning, Kansas sky was the color of cold dishwater, and Widow's Ridge sat on the horizon like a promise nobody wanted to keep. That's where my father's will was set to be read. My stepmother Marianne insisted we do it at the farmhouse for sentimental reasons. Around here, sentimental usually means no paper trail. I pulled up in front of the small brick church by the highway because I needed a minute with God, or at least with quiet. That's when I saw him again, the rail-thin veteran who sleeps under the portico, most nights the one folks pretend not to see. He tugged the bill of his cap down and limped over. "Ms. Ellie," he said, voice rough as gravel, "don't sign anything up there today." He pressed a manila envelope into my hands. "Your daddy did right by me. Time to pay him back." Inside was a photocopy of my father's will, at least it looked like it, and a second page, an addendum with a shaky signature that didn't look like Daddy's on his worst day. A red pen had circled a clause power of sale to my brother Dylan, and of all people, our family attorney, Mr. Rusk. I swallowed hard. "Sir, what's your name?" "Cole," he said. "Sergeant Cole. Harold Harper pulled me out of a bad stretch. I owe him." He started to walk away, then turned back. "By the way, check your lug nuts." I thought it was an odd thing to hear at 8 a.m. on a Thursday. Then I bent down by my front tire and saw it a shiny thread of metal dust clinging to the rim, the kind you get when someone loosens what should never be loose. I tightened the wheel with the cheap wrench in my trunk and felt my heartbeat climb into my throat. Not today. Not with my father's name on the line. As I crested Widow's Ridge, the radio preacher was talking about wolves in sheep's clothing. I turned him down and talked to Daddy instead, the way people do with the dead when they've got no one left to tell the truth to. If there's a fight to be had, "Daddy," I said, "I'll have it. But I won't swing wild." Before I step inside, let me ask you something, friend. If the person warning you is the one your town ignores, do you listen or do you walk into the lion's den and pretend you don't smell meat? If this story hits a nerve, if your family ever put you on trial in your own kitchen stick with me, and hey, we share a new story like this every week. If you want more truth, more twist, and just enough grace to go on, hit subscribe and join us. Because sometimes the people who should hold you together are the ones tearing you apart. Today I decided not to tear. Marianne always smelled like lilacs and trouble. She opened the farmhouse door as if she owned the wind. "Ellie," she sang, voice bright as Sunday punch. "You look tired. Long drive." "Just steady," I said, stepping past her into the front room. The parlor had been staged within an inch of its life. Fresh magnolia dust-free mantle, the portrait of my father centered just so. But the floors told on her. The scuffs were new. The rug was a hair crooked. Someone had dragged furniture around in a hurry. Dylan came in from the kitchen carrying a tray with coffee he didn't offer me. 34 years old, and still the boy who looked over fences to see what he should want. His eyes didn't hold mine long. "Sis." Mr. Rusk, our family attorney, rose from the settee like a bad thought. He had the kind of suit that says, "Trust me," while his shoes say, "Don't." "Ms. Harper," he nodded. "Your father was very clear about his wishes." "Mine too," I said. "He wanted peace." "Then let's not make this harder than it needs to be," Marianne said, guiding me toward an armchair near the fireplace. The room had 4 chairs, but somehow everyone drifted toward where she wanted them. Her hand landed on the back of one wingback, the one with the needlepoint she insisted my father loved. "Sit here, dear." I glanced down. On the front leg, just under the carved foot, a hairline fracture ran across the grain, barely visible. The rug bunched a little where the leg would land if the chair went out from under me. "Actually," I said, moving to the chair by the window, "I've missed the view." I slid the needlepoint chair toward Dylan. "You take Daddy's seat. He'd like that." Dylan hesitated. Pride pulled him into it. He sat. The chair held for one heartbeat. Then the front leg splayed with a dry crack, and the whole thing pitched. Coffee sloshed onto his jeans. He pinwheeled for the mantel. The empty mug shattered like old promises. Marianne gasped. "Oh, mercy, that chair Harold kept saying it needed re-gluing." "Strange," I said softly, kneeling to examine the break. "Fresh wood, fresh sawdust caught on the rug's edge. Looks more like someone weakened it yesterday." Rusk crouched beside me too quick for an old back. "Accidents happen," he said, scooping the broken leg as if it were a lost child. "Shall we begin?" We gathered at the dining table where an envelope lay fat as Thanksgiving. Rusk cleared his throat. "Per your father's wishes, we'll first read. The operative will then acknowledge an addendum." I could feel Sergeant Cole's envelope heavy in my purse. I could also feel the old house breathing. There's a sound a farmhouse makes when it remembers. It was making that sound now. "Before you read anything," I said, "we're going to slow down. I'd like to see the attestation page, the witness signatures, the notary seal." Rusk's smile thinned. "Ms. Harper, you work in medicine, not law." "Right, which is why I document everything." I slid my phone face down on the table. "We do it by the book, Mr. Rusk, or we don't do it at all," Marianne tisked. "Ellie, honey, your father wanted family to handle family, no outsiders. It was his last request." "Was it?" I asked. I looked at Dylan. His knee bounced under the table. The boy couldn't lie without moving, because Daddy's last request to me was, "Don't let my work feed wolves." Rusk reluctantly produced the will. The attestation looked proper: 2 witnesses, a notary whose name I recognized from the bank. Then he reached for a second envelope, and this is the addendum executed 3 weeks later. 3 weeks, I said. That would be after his neurologist raised questions about mild cognitive impairment. Rusk paused. Marianne's mouth pressed into a white line. Dylan picked at a coffee stain on his cuff as if he could erase something by rubbing it hard enough. "Just read it," Marianne said. He did. The addendum shifted power of sale and management to Dylan and to, of course, Rusk as co-fiduciary. It also altered a gift Daddy had earmarked for our church's small veterans pantry, cutting it in half. My jaw clenched. Not because of money, because of meanness. "Ellie," Marianne said sweetly, "sign the acknowledgement so we can get appraisal started. Your father trusted us to move quickly." "Where's the original?" I asked. "Not a photocopy, not a scan. The original with wet ink." "In my office," Rusk said. "We're not obligated to." "You are if I contest," I said. And I am. Silence fell heavy. Outside, a hawk screamed over the fields. It sounded like a warning. Dylan stood abruptly. "I need air." He limped a little as he left sore from the fall he wasn't supposed to take. I watched him go and felt the old ache, the kid I once pushed on a tire swing, now playing muscle for people who never loved him enough to tell him the truth. Marianne leaned in her perfume, a soft lie. "Ellie, let me mother you for once. Be reasonable. This can still be good for all of us." I met her eyes and let her see the part of me that had watched men die on gurneys because someone cut corners. I'm done being reasonable with unreasonable people. Rusk closed the folder. "Then we'll adjourn. Tomorrow morning, my office. Bring counsel if you must." "I must," I said, standing. "And while you're at it, have that chair repaired. It's too honest for this room." The door to Daddy's office sticks in summer and in secrets. It gave way on my second try. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and pencil shavings. The sunlight through the lace curtain made a checkerboard on the old oak desk where Daddy taught me how to balance a checkbook and a heart. I wasn't snooping. I was remembering. My father believed in order. His desk drawers were labeled with masking tape and ballpoint in his blocky hand, "Tax Seeds Church Vets." The bottom left was unlabeled. It pulled open like a mouth. Inside sat a dusty shoebox, a man's life in cardboard Polaroids of wheat harvests and frozen winters, a pocket knife that had opened 1,000 feed sacks and tucked in a tissue, an old micro-cassette recorder with a tape already inside. On the tape, my father had written, "If you're my daughter, you'll listen." I shut the door, drew the shade, and pressed play. Static first, then Daddy's voice thin but steady. Ellie girl, if this finds you, it means I couldn't say it out loud without starting a war. After your mama passed, I didn't plan to marry again. Loneliness'll make a fool out of a man. He coughed, cleared his throat. Marianne likes pretty things. I like to provide. But pretty and providing ain't the same as loving. Rusk came by late, too late paperwork I didn't call for. Said it was to clarify. I told him no. He said there were matters from my past that might embarrass me. He meant your mama's medical debts I couldn't cover clean. He had dates only a banker or a snake would know. My hand flew to my mouth. Daddy never spoke ill of anybody, not even when they deserved it. I signed a paper I didn't read right. My head's not what it was. Doc says there's a word for it. I say it's getting old. If you're hearing this, check with Pastor Caleb. He was there for the first will. He knows what I wanted. I wanted you and Dylan taken care of and whatever's left to go where it'll do good. If they change that, it wasn't me. A pause. A sound like the recorder being set down on the desk. Then softer. And Ellie, don't be hard on your brother. He's been easy to lead since the day he learned to walk. The tape clicked. I rewound and listened again because sometimes a second blow hurts worse. When I stopped, the room was too quiet for a house that had held so much noise. Marianne's silhouette passed the frosted glass. The doorknob jiggled. Ellie, you in there? I slid the recorder into my purse and opened up, just saying goodbye to Daddy's maps. She studied me, a cat measuring a bird. Do you ever get tired of being the strong one? Not today. I brushed past her down the hall to the back porch where the wind knew my name. My hands shook the way they do after a code blue not during. In my line of work, the body keeps moving until it's safe to fall apart. Pastor Caleb's church sits 4 miles down County 12 white clapboard, and a bell that tilts like an old man's hat. He baptized me when I was 9, buried my mother when I was 30, and stood beside my father when he drafted his will the first time. I found him trimming rose bushes in a cardigan nobody should wear in August. Ellie, he said, pushing his glasses up. World's been waiting for you. We sat in the shade. I set the micro cassette between us like a relic. He listened without interrupting the way only a man who has heard every secret in a small town can listen. When the tape clicked, he nodded, once eyes glassy. Your father asked me to witness the original will, he said. Rusk wasn't available that day, claimed he was out of county. Funny because his car was parked behind the bank. You saw him. I saw his license plate after I left Harold's kitchen. Ellie. I kept a sealed copy of the original in the church safe. A pastor learns to keep receipts. A laugh escaped my throat, half joy, half ache. I could kiss you, Pastor. He blushed the way men of God used to. Best not. But we'll open it with a third-party present, someone your stepmother can't claim is biased. And Ellie, there's more. Sergeant Cole. He's been sleeping under our portico by choice. He's got pride. Harold made sure he had food and medication. Last week, Cole told me a man in a gray suit asked him too many questions about the comings and goings at your daddy's place. Gray suit like Rusk's funeral clothes, or like a banker, he said. In this county, they're the same. I stared at the parsonage across the way, paint peeling in long curls, faithful in its shabbiness. They loosened my lug nuts. They staged a busted chair. They thought fear would make me quick. Pastor Caleb's voice was soft steel. The devil's favorite tool is hurry. I stood. Then we go slow. Tomorrow I bring counsel. You bring the sealed copy. And I'll bring the one thing they never planned for. What's that? He asked. Mercy at the end of a hammer. He smiled, sad and proud. Your daddy raised you right. As I drove back up Widow's Ridge, the afternoon heat lay on the fields like a heavy quilt. I stopped at the church and found Sergeant Cole sitting on the steps feeding sparrows like he had more bread than he needed. Thank you, I said, handing him a brown bag with a proper sandwich and a new pair of wool socks, for risking your neck to save my life. He tipped his cap. Your father saved mine first. Would you tell that to a room full of wolves? He looked at the horizon where the sun throws long shadows of everything we've built. Ma'am, he said, I fought in places where truth got men killed. I can speak it in a farmhouse. Tomorrow, I said, bring whatever you've got. He patted the pocket of his jacket. Pictures, dates, and a memory that keeps better than film. The bell in Pastor's steeple told the hour 5 notes, 1 for each finger. I needed to keep a grip on what was left of my family. Tomorrow the count would start for real. The next morning, the Kansas sun rose pale and tired, like it had stayed up worrying the night before. I drove the 4 miles to St. Luke's Pastor Caleb's small clappered church. The bell tower leaned a little the way age makes us all lean if we're lucky enough to last. Pastor Caleb was already outside, trimming hedges with a pair of rusty clippers. His cardigan sagged in the heat, and sweat glistened on his brow, but his face lit up when he saw me. "Ellie," he called, setting down the clippers. "Harold's girl, you look like you're carrying bricks in that purse." He wasn't wrong. Inside sat my father's recorder, the envelope from Sergeant Cole, and the weight of a family I wasn't sure I still had. "Pastor, I said you were there when Daddy signed his first will, weren't you?" He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Kitchen table, lemonade sweating in mason jars. I signed as witness, so did Mary Ellen from the feed store. Rusk said he was out of county that day. Funny though, I saw his Buick parked behind the bank right after. The words made my stomach tighten. You saw him. License plate and all. I remember because he had one of those novelty frames that said, "Lawyers do it by the book." I thought not always. We went inside where the air smelled faintly of hymnals and lemon polish. The church was quiet pews lined like ribs, light slanting through stained glass in fractured colors. Caleb led me to the back office, a small room with a desk scarred from decades of sermons and funerals. "Sit," he said, pulling out a metal key from his pocket. He unlocked the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet, then another lockbox inside. From it, he lifted a thick envelope sealed with wax. "Your father asked me to hold this. Said if anyone ever doubted his wishes, the truth ought to be here." I stared at the envelope. "You've had the original will all this time." I've learned, Caleb said softly, that sometimes the most Christian thing you can do is keep receipts. He placed the envelope in my hands. The seal was still intact, dated 2 years earlier. The weight of it sent a tremor through me. Proof. Not whispers. Not suspicions. Proof. But Caleb wasn't done. He opened his desk drawer again and pulled out a small leather journal, edges worn soft. "This is Harold's too. He asked me to hold it. Thought it might help you someday." The journal was filled with my father's uneven handwriting. I flipped to the last entry, July 14th. Rusk and Marianne came late. Said I needed to sign a clarification. My head wasn't clear, but they pressed. I told them no. Marianne cried. Rusk threatened. I signed something I couldn't read. "Lord, forgive me. I think I made a mistake." The words blurred as tears burned my eyes. Daddy had known. He hadn't trusted his own mind at the end, but he trusted me to find the truth. I looked up at Caleb, throat tight. They took advantage of him. He laid a steady hand on mine. "Greed doesn't wait for a man to die. It circles while he's weak. Harold knew that. That's why he came to me." I set the journal down gently like it might break. "Pastor, will you stand with me when this comes to light?" "I will," he said firmly. "But Ellie, you need to prepare yourself. They won't surrender easy. Marianne has charm for strangers and claws for family. And Rusk, he's made a career out of twisting the law until it screams." "I don't care how loud it screams," I said. "I've got my father's voice on tape, his will in my hand, and your word to back me. That's more truth than they ever planned for." Caleb smiled faintly. "Your daddy would be proud." Before I left, he stopped me at the door. "One more thing. Sergeant Cole. He's not as invisible as folks think. He told me Rusk cornered him last week, asked what time you usually left the house. Cole said he played dumb, but the man pressed." My heart thudded. They were watching me. Like hawks, Caleb said, which means they know you're not rolling over. Be careful, Ellie. Wolves bite hardest when they're cornered. I thanked him and walked out into the hot morning. The cicadas buzzed loud like a warning siren only Kansas understands. I gripped the envelope in one hand, the recorder in the other, and thought of Daddy's words, "Don't let my work feed wolves." For the first time since his funeral, I felt like he was right beside me, walking me down the church steps, whispering that I wasn't alone. But as I reached my car, a shadow shifted near the side lot. A gray sedan, idled windows tinted dark. My skin prickled. I didn't need to see the license plate to know whose it was. Rusk watching, waiting. I slipped into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. If he wanted to play games in the shadows, fine. But tomorrow, under God's roof, and in front of every witness who mattered, I'd bring him into the light. And light, my father always said, doesn't need permission to burn. Money leaves a trail even when lies try to cover it. Daddy used to say, "Wheat fields don't lie, Ellie. If you plant corn, corn comes up. If you plant weeds, you'll spend all summer pulling them." I kept hearing his voice as I spread bank statements across my kitchen table, the ones Caleb had helped me get through a friendly clerk at the courthouse. At first glance, Daddy's finances looked normal checks to the seed supplier, utility bills, donations to the church pantry. But then I noticed them 3 identical transfers every month, small but steady, always to the same account at a nursing facility 2 towns over. The name on the ledger, Maple Grove Care Home. I sat back confused. Daddy wasn't a resident there. Neither was anyone I knew from our family. Unless it was someone he didn't want us to know about. The thought hit me hard, a mistress. Was Daddy supporting another woman all those years right under our noses? My hands shook as I tapped the address into my GPS. The drive to Maple Grove felt longer than it was the Kansas highway, stretching like a question with no end. The facility was small, clean with flower beds full of zinnias. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and jello. An aide in scrubs looked up from the desk. "Can I help you, ma'am? I'm here to ask about a resident. Harper. Harold Harper may have been helping someone here financially." She frowned, tapped the computer. "Not Harold, no. But we do have a Harper listed as emergency contact. Resident name Clara Jenkins. Room 212. I thanked her and climbed the stairs, my legs heavier with each step. Room 212 door was ajar. Inside sat a frail woman with long gray hair braided neatly down her back. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the pages of a worn Bible. She looked up when I knocked, her eyes soft-tired but startlingly familiar. They were Marianne's eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice shaky but clear. "My name's Ellie Harper," I said gently. "I think my father helped you. I'm trying to understand why." She studied me for a long moment. "You're Harold's girl. I can see it. He used to bring me pears from his orchard. Said no one should go without something sweet." My throat tightened. "And you are—" She closed the Bible fingers, lingering on the cover. Clara Jenkins. But once before I was married and before life chewed me up, my name was Clara Marianne Stone. The room tilted. "Marianne. As in—" She nodded slowly. "Your stepmother. I'm her daughter, the one she never claimed." I gripped the chair back for balance. "She told everyone she never had children. She didn't want me," Clara said simply. "Had me at 16, left me with my grandmother. By the time I was old enough to ask questions, she was gone. Started a new life. By then, I was just a mistake she'd rather bury." My chest burned. Daddy must have found out. He must have been quietly sending money here month after month, out of decency, not shame. Clara looked away. He never judged her. Never judged me. Said a woman who works hard to stay alive deserves dignity. But Marianne hated that he visited. Once she came here herself, demanded the staff never mention her name, threatened to cut the funding if they did. "Did she sign anything?" I asked carefully. Clara reached for the nightstand drawer. Inside lay a small stack of forms, receipts for payments, authorization slips. I pulled one out, and my heart nearly stopped. The signature line read, Harold T. Harper, but the handwriting wasn't his. It was too perfect, too flowing. I'd seen that handwriting on recipe cards and Christmas letters. It was Marianne's. "You kept these," I whispered. Clara gave a weary smile. "Harold told me once, 'Keep paper, Clara. Paper tells on people when mouths stay shut.'" My hands shook as I slid the papers into my folder. "Clara, would you be willing to testify, to tell someone official that Marianne forged my father's name?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't have much breath left, but if it helps Harold's memory, I'll speak. He was the only man who ever treated me like I wasn't shame itself." I reached across, squeezed her thin hand. "You're not shame. You're truth." For a moment, silence sat heavy, only the tick of the wall clock filling the air. Then Clara leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Be careful, Ellie. Marianne once told me, blood doesn't matter, paper matters. If I have the paper, I win. She believes that." My jaw clenched. Then we'll show her the paper she didn't plan for. As I left Maple Grove, the late afternoon sun painted the parking lot gold, but I felt no warmth. The folder in my bag now held proof, forged signatures, hidden money, a forgotten daughter. Daddy's words came back, "Don't let my work feed wolves." He had spent his last years trying to quietly protect the daughter his wife abandoned, and in the process he'd given me the thread I needed to unravel Marianne's whole scheme. When I started the car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. A black SUV was parked across the street, engine idling. My stomach knotted. Dylan's vehicle. He was watching. I gripped the steering wheel, steadying myself. Let him watch. Let them all watch. Because the deeper I dug, the more I realized the truth wasn't buried. It was waiting. And tomorrow it would rise. By the time I got home from Maple Grove, the sky was swollen with storm clouds. Kansas knows how to hold its breath before it breaks. I sat at my kitchen table with Clara's papers spread in front of me, listening to the rumble of thunder. Marianne had her forged signatures. Rusk had his legal addendum. Dylan had his blind loyalty. What did I have? A dying woman's testimony, a pastor's sealed envelope, and a cassette tape my father left like breadcrumbs. It was good, but not enough. People like Rusk don't fold when you accuse them. They fold when you make them greedy. That's when the idea came. Daddy used to say, if you want to know a man, give him a shovel and see what he digs first, gold or graves. I was about to hand Dylan a shovel. The next morning, I called him. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight, maybe still sore from that busted chair. "Dill, I've been thinking," I said, sugar in my tone. "This is getting ugly. Daddy wanted peace. Maybe if I show some trust, you'll show me the same." Silence, then suspicion. What kind of trust? "I'll sign a temporary authorization, 48 hours. You can manage the estate funds just to handle that tax issue Marianne keeps squawking about. After that, we meet again and settle fair. No lawyers breathing down our necks." I could almost hear his heart speed up. "You'd really do that?" "For Daddy's sake," I said. By noon, we met at Rusk's office. Marianne sat there in her lilac perfume, smiling like a cat with cream on her whiskers. Rusk produced the paperwork, neat and binding. Dylan puffed up his chest as he signed. I signed too, but what they didn't know was that I'd had Pastor Caleb's nephew, a notary public and tech-savvy kid, witness the whole thing. He'd also wired a discreet recorder into my purse. Rusk cleared his throat. "You'll find this arrangement efficient. 2 days is plenty of time to show good faith." "Good faith," I repeated, biting back a laugh. The very next morning, reports started trickling in. A neighbor texted me, "Your brother's got trucks down at the East Field loading green wheat like it's payday." My chest burned. Daddy never sold early, never. He said selling green was like selling your children before they could stand. It ruined the soil, the price, the legacy. I drove out to the East Field. Sure enough, semis with Rusk's company logo were lined up, men in hard hats harvesting crops weeks too soon. Dylan stood on the ridge clipboard in hand, grinning like a boy who'd found treasure. I walked up slow. Quite the operation, little brother. He turned startled. "Ellie, you weren't supposed to." He stopped himself. I mean, someone had to move quick. Taxes don't pay themselves. Quick, huh? I pulled out my phone. Funny thing about phones, they record calls too. Like the one you made to Rusk last night. About selling green. About splitting the proceeds before I even saw the books. His face drained. You were listening. I was documenting. I said my voice flat. Daddy taught me better than to trust empty words. The wind picked up, bending the wheat, carrying the sour smell of cut green. Dylan looked small against it. Ellie, you don't understand. Rusk promised. He said we'd clear debts, then there'd be plenty left. Marianne said if we didn't act fast, we'd lose everything. You already lost everything I said holding up my phone, because this right here is fraud. Temporary authorization doesn't give you the right to destroy value. It just gave you the chance to show your hand. And you did. He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. Sis, please, don't take this to court. I can fix it. We'll split it, just you and me. Marianne doesn't have to know. For a second, I saw the boy I grew up with, the one who begged me to cover when he broke Daddy's tractor light, who swore he'd pay me back with his allowance. But that boy was gone. This man had traded him for greed. I stepped back. You think Marianne doesn't know she orchestrated this? And Rusk, he's already pocketing his share while you stand out here in the mud. You're just their errand boy, Dylan. And the saddest part is you wanted the job. His shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked ashamed. I turned to leave, but paused. 2 days, Dylan. That's what I gave you. And in less than one, you sold your soul for green wheat. Daddy would have said that shovel you're holding, you just dug your own grave. As I drove away, thunder finally cracked rain falling in hard sheets across the field. In my rear view, Dylan stood alone, Clippard hanging at his side, truck still rolling off with our father's legacy. But in my front seat, my phone blinked with the recording. His voice clear as daylight. Rusk will split it before Ellie sees the books. That was all I needed. Paper tells on people Daddy said, but sometimes voices do too. The storm cleared overnight, leaving the Kansas sky scrubbed raw blue and endless. By morning, the fields still shimmered with rain. It felt like the land had been washed clean. My family hadn't. I called Marianne and Dylan. We need to meet, I said. Not at the farmhouse, not at Rusk's office, at St. Luke's. Tomorrow noon. Marianne bristled. The church. That's not proper. It's neutral ground I cut in. Daddy trusted that place. If you won't come, I'll assume you've got something to hide. There was a pause, then her syrupy voice. Fine, Ellie. We'll humor you. I hung up and immediately called Sergeant Cole. His gravel voice answered on the second ring. You ready for them wolves, Miss Harper? Ready, I said, but I need you there. With everything you've got. I'll bring the box, he said. The next day, the church bell tolled 12 echoing across Widow's Ridge. Inside the sanctuary smelled of old wood and hymnals. Pastor Caleb stood by the pulpit steady as an oak. I sat in the front pew, papers and recorder tucked in my bag. Marianne entered first, perfume preceding her like a flag of war. Dylan trailed behind, wringing his hands. And finally Rusk, polished as ever, briefcase clutched like it held the 10 Commandments. Let's make this quick, Marianne said, sliding into the pew opposite mine. We all have better things to do than stage dramatics. Better things than the truth, I asked. Russ gave a tight smile. Truth is whatever the documents say, Ms. Harper, and we have them. The church doors creaked again. Every head turned. In shuffled Sergeant Cole coat, worn thin boots scuffed but eyes sharp. He carried a weathered shoebox under one arm. Marianne's smile faltered. What is he doing here? Daddy's friend, I said simply. And today, a witness. Cole tipped his cap to Pastor Caleb, then set the shoebox on the altar. His voice was rough but steady. Name's Sergeant Daniel Cole. Your husband Marianne saved my life in '91. I've owed him ever since. And I seen things these past months that don't sit right. Rusk scoffed. This is absurd. The man's homeless, unreliable. Cole's eyes narrowed. Unreliable, huh? Then maybe this won't matter. He opened the shoebox. Inside lay a stack of Polaroids dates scribbled on the margins. He held one up. It showed Rusk's Buick parked behind the farmhouse late at night. Through the kitchen window, my father sat slumped, head in his hands. Marianne stood over him, paper in hand. Rusk beside her, pointing with a pen. My breath caught. Cole laid down another photo, my father's face pale, confused. Marianne gripping his wrist, guiding the pen. No, Marianne whispered, color draining from her cheeks. That's taken out of context. Cole's voice cut her off. I was in the hedgerow that night, couldn't sleep. I heard him say, I don't understand this. Heard you, Marianne, say, just sign it, Harold. If you love me, sign it. And Rusk, you told him it's just clarification. The sanctuary fell silent, heavy as judgment. Dylan shifted in his seat, whispering, Mom. Shut up, Marianne hissed. I rose, heart pounding. You coerced him when he wasn't in his right mind. You forged his hand at Maple Grove. You stole his voice. Rusk slammed his briefcase shut. This is slander, a vagrant's word in some grainy photos hardly admissible. Maybe, I said, pulling the micro cassette recorder from my bag. But paired with Daddy's own words, it's more than enough. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the sanctuary, thin but clear. Marianne cried. Rusk threatened. I signed something I couldn't read. Lord, forgive me. I think I made a mistake. Dylan's face crumpled. He said that. Yes, I said, my throat tight. He trusted us to protect him. You sold him out for promises and profit. Marianne stood trembling. You don't know what it's like, Ellie, to be left with nothing, to claw your way up from shame. Harold never understood I had to fight for every scrap. And so you stole his legacy, I asked, voice sharp. You turned shame into greed and called it survival. Daddy gave you a home. You gave him betrayal. Her eyes flashed, but she had no answer. Pastor Caleb stepped forward, hand on the pulpit. This house has heard every sin in the book, but coercing a dying man's will, that's a wound deeper than most. The truth's plain now. What you do with it is between you and God, but the law won't be so forgiving. Cole closed the shoebox, voice gravel low. Harold deserved better, and I ain't done paying him back. I met his eyes grateful. For years the town had looked past him, but today he stood taller than anyone in that room. As Marianne sank back into the pew, face pale and Rusk fumed beside her, I felt something shift. The wolves were cornered, and for the first time I wasn't afraid, because I had truth on my side, and truth doesn't break, even when families do. The air in St. Luke's sanctuary still felt heavy from Cole's testimony when the doors creaked open again. A man in a dark gray suit entered, briefcase in one hand, papers under his arm. His presence was calm but commanding, like someone who knew every eye in the room would turn his way. This Pastor Caleb announced is Mr. Jonathan Marks, independent counsel from Topeka. He's agreed to oversee the review of Harold Harper's will, neutral ground. Rusk stiffened. Unnecessary. I'm the family's attorney of record. Not anymore, I said, rising. Conflict of interest disqualifies you. Daddy saw that coming. That's why he gave Caleb the sealed copy. Marks set his briefcase on the altar and spoke with quiet authority. We'll proceed by the book. Ms. Harper, Pastor Caleb, would you produce the envelope? Caleb laid the wax-sealed envelope on the table. My hands shook as Marks cut it open. The paper inside was yellowed at the edges, but crisp, my father's blocky handwriting clear at the top. Last will and testament of Harold Thomas Harper. Marks read aloud, his voice filling the sanctuary. To my children, Eleanor and Dylan, I leave the farm and proceeds in equal measure. To my wife, Marianne, a life estate in the farmhouse, provided she act in good faith. And to the Veterans Pantry of St. Luke's, a tithe of 20% in gratitude for second chances. I heard Dylan exhale sharply. Equal measure. It was never just mine. Daddy had tried to be fair. But then Marks paused, eyes narrowing at a paragraph near the end. Interesting, he murmured, then louder. In the event that any beneficiary shall attempt to coerce, manipulate, or falsify documents for the purpose of altering this will, that party shall be disqualified from inheritance. Their portion shall pass to the remaining heirs." The words hit the room like thunder. Dylan's face went pale. Marianne clutched her purse. "That clause," Mark said, looking up, "is what we call an ethical safeguard. Rare, but perfectly legal." Rusk barked a laugh. "Convenient. You expect us to take an old man's paranoid scribble as gospel." Marks didn't flinch. "I expect to examine evidence, which brings us to the alleged addendum." Reluctantly, Rusk produced the paper he had been clutching for weeks. He laid it flat. Executed 3 weeks after the original. Harold's signature plain as day. Mark studied it, then nodded toward the back. A woman in a navy skirt suit stepped forward, carrying a slim case. Dr. Patel, he introduced, forensic document examiner, certified by the state. Marianne bristled. "This is absurd. Dragging in strangers to do what's right," I snapped. Dr. Patel adjusted her glasses, pulling out magnifiers and sidelights. She examined the signature stroke by stroke, murmuring notes. The sanctuary was so quiet you could hear Dylan's foot tapping against the wooden floor. Finally, she straightened. "The signature on this addendum is not consistent with Harold Harper's known handwriting. Line quality is too fluid for a man diagnosed with cognitive impairment. Pressure patterns match documents authored by Marianne Stone in earlier years." Gasps rippled through the pews. "Forgery," Mark said flatly. Marianne's face flushed crimson. "That's ridiculous." Dr. Patel held up copies side by side, Harold's blocky, hesitant scrawl against Marianne's graceful loops. The difference was undeniable. "Harold was not capable of producing this signature," she said. "This is beyond reasonable doubt a forgery." Dylan buried his face in his hands. "Mom, what did you do?" Marianne hissed. "I did it for you, for both of us. You think Ellie was going to share? Harold favored her every step of the way. I wasn't going to sit back and be left scraps." Her voice echoed through the sanctuary, every word damning her more. Rusk tried to recover, adjusting his tie. Even if that were true, no court would. Marks cut him off firm. Every court would. Fraudulent documents. Coercion of a vulnerable adult. And by the clause in this original will, both Marianne Stone and any co-conspirators are disqualified. The room spun with whispers. Caleb bowed his head. Cole stood straighter, arms crossed like a sentry. I looked at Dylan. His eyes darted fear and shame wrestling in his face. "It didn't have to be like this," I said softly. He muttered, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she forged it." Rusk said it was just a clarification. But Marianne cut him off. "Don't be naive, Dylan. You wanted the power as much as I did. You signed the harvest contract. You took the money." His head dropped. Silence swallowed his defense. Marks gathered the documents, sealing them back into his briefcase. "I'll file a petition with the probate court. Given the evidence, photographs, recordings, testimony, handwriting analysis, this case will move swiftly, and the police will be informed immediately." I exhaled for the first time in hours. Daddy's voice on that tape, the clause in his will, Cole's photos, Clara's receipts. It was all weaving together, a net too tight for them to slip through. For once, the truth wasn't just in my heart. It was on paper, and paper, as Daddy said, always tells. The sanctuary at St. Luke's still buzzed with murmurs when heavy footsteps echoed from the back. 2 uniformed deputies entered, followed by a tall man in a charcoal suit carrying a leather folio. His voice carried authority without needing to shout. "Thomas Keenan, Assistant District Attorney," he said. "We've been briefed, and after hearing what's unfolded, this moves beyond family squabbles. This is fraud, possibly attempted exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Rusk's face blanched. "Now wait, Keenan raised a hand. "Save it for arraignment." He nodded to the deputies. "Secure the documents." Marks handed over the briefcase with the will and forged addendum. One deputy sealed them in an evidence pouch. Marianne's eyes widened as if watching her lifeline being carried out the door. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "You can't just march in here and—" "Yes, we can, Keenan, cut in, because crimes were committed and witnesses are lining up." He looked at Cole, then at me. "You've all done half my job already." The words seemed to crush Dylan. He slumped in the pew, face buried in his hands. Finally, his voice broke through the silence, raw and trembling. "It's true," he said. "All of it. I went along. I signed what they gave me. I let Rusk talk me into selling green wheat. I thought I was protecting the farm, but I knew it wasn't right." He looked at me, tears streaking down his face. "Ellie, I'm sorry. Daddy would hate me for what I've become." I swallowed hard, my anger warring with pity. "Daddy would hate what you did, but he'd want you to face it clean. That's the only way back." Marianne grabbed his arm. "Don't you dare confess. They can't prove a thing without us united." But Dylan shook her off. "United, you forged his name, Mother. You lied to me, to everyone." His voice cracked. "You used me." For a moment, her mask slipped. The polished charm, the practiced poise, it all collapsed into a snarl. "You were too weak to lead. I did what had to be done. You should be thanking me." The DA's voice was cool sharp. "That's enough. Every word you just spoke is admissible." Rusk finally tried to regain ground, adjusting his tie. "I demand counsel. This proceeding is irregular, prejudicial." Keenan stepped closer. "Counsel, you are counsel, and now you're a suspect. You orchestrated the addendum. You coached signatures. You stood to profit." He leaned in. "And when this goes to trial, your career ends where your greed began." Rusk's mouth opened, but no words came. Sweat gathered at his temples. For once, the man who made his living twisting the law had nothing left to twist. Keenan turned back to Marks. "Now about the will. To avoid confusion, we'll make the contents clear." Marks opened his notes. As read earlier, Harold Harper divided his estate equally, half to Eleanor, half to Dylan. Marianne retained only a life estate in the farmhouse contingent on good faith. The clause against coercion now triggers meaning. Marianne forfeits all rights. Dylan's portion remains, unless the court determines his actions disqualify him too. Dylan looked at me, eyes pleading. "Ellie, please, don't let them take it all. I'll accept probation, pay restitution, just don't let me lose Daddy's land." Tears stung my eyes. I thought of Daddy's voice on that cassette. The true worth of a family isn't in money, but in how we treat each other. He had never wanted division. He had wanted us to stand together. But greed had split us worse than any storm. I stood, voice shaking but firm. Daddy left us equal. He never wanted me to win and you to lose. He wanted us to share. But you and Marianne let fear and greed blind you. If you trusted his word, you'd still have half. Now, I looked at the DA. Now that's for the law to decide. Marianne lunged to her feet, eyes wild. "You smug little girl. You think this is victory. Harold never loved me the way he loved your mother. Do you know what it's like to be second choice your whole life? I took what I deserved." Pastor Caleb's voice rang from the pulpit, steady as iron. "You took nothing but shame, Marianne, and shame can't be spent." The deputies moved in. One took Rusk by the arm, the other guided Marianne toward the door. Dylan didn't resist when they turned to him. He just looked back at me, broken. "Tell Grace," he whispered, naming my daughter. "Tell her Uncle Dylan's sorry." I had no words. The doors closed behind them, leaving the sanctuary hushed heavy with truth. For the first time in months, I felt Daddy's presence not as grief, but as strength. His will had spoken louder than Marianne's lies, sharper than Rusk's schemes. In the end, he had given us all enough. It was greed that took everything away, and that I realized was the real inheritance. The courthouse days blurred after that hearings, affidavit signatures on papers that weighed more than they looked. Reporters camped at the edge of the farm road, hungry for headlines about the Harper scandal. But when the dust settled, when the deputies had driven Marianne, Dylan, and Rusk away in separate cars, the land grew quiet again. That night, I walked the rows of wheat alone. The storm had knocked some stalks flat, but most still stood stubborn and golden. Daddy would have smiled at that. "Crops are like people, Ellie," he used to say. "They bend in the storm, but if their roots are strong, they rise again." I came home to find my little girl Grace asleep on the couch, her crayon drawings scattered like confetti. My husband Mark sat nearby, worry etched deep in his face until he saw me. Then it softened like clouds breaking for sun. I knelt, brushing Grace's hair back. She stirred, whispering, "Mommy, did we win?" My throat tightened. "We didn't win, sweetheart. We told the truth. And that's better." Mark reached for my hand. "And now it's over." I nodded, though a piece of me knew it was never truly over. The scars of betrayal don't vanish with verdicts. They linger, teaching us what love should and shouldn't be. Later, when the house was quiet, I opened Daddy's journal again. The last page still read, "The true worth of a family isn't in money, but in how we treat each other." I sat there a long time, letting the words settle in my bones. Marianne had chased money until it cost her freedom. Dylan had traded trust for quick profit and lost his birthright. Even Rusk, clever as a fox, ended up trapped in his own lies. But Daddy, he left me something they couldn't touch. A reminder that legacies aren't measured in acres or bank accounts, but in the people we carry with us when the storm passes. I looked at Grace, asleep in her bed, her small hand curled around her toy horse, and I felt that truth settle like steady ground under my feet. The next Sunday, Pastor Caleb preached about redemption. He said sometimes God lets the weeds grow right alongside the wheat just to show us the difference. I sat in the back pew holding Grace's hand, and for the first time since Daddy died, I didn't feel alone. The farm was still here. My family, the one I built with Mark and Grace, was still here. And Daddy's voice, steady as the plains whined, would never leave me. Justice had come, but healing that was still a journey. And maybe, just maybe, it starts by telling the story. So if you've been listening, if you've carried my family's storm with me, thank you. If you've ever felt betrayed by those who should have held you up, know this, you're not alone. We may be broken, but we are not beyond repair. If this story touched, you share it. Leave a comment, tell me what legacy means in your life. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us even when family breaks, truth and love can still rise. Because in the end, that's the only inheritance worth keeping.